Okay, good morning. So we're up to Shin Chof Aleph Seif Yud Beis, working through the halachas of Teichin on Shabbos, and today we'll come across another very important rule in Teichin. Says the Mechaba, Hamechatik Hayorak Dak Dak. If someone cuts up a vegetable very finely, Chayev Mishum Teichin, then is Chayev for the Issa of Teichin, the Melach of Teichin. Vuadin To'asa Lachtich Gregoris V'Charuvim. So too you can't cut up Gregorous figs, v'charuvim and carobs, lefnei zakenim, for older people who can't eat it without you cutting it very finely. For davka pears v'chadom lezeh osa, and it's davka pears which are osa, you can't cut them very finely. That's included in teichin. Avol muta lefarer lechem lefnei l'tanagolim. You're allowed to crumble bread in front of chickens. The hoil v'kvan nitchan ein lochash, because this was previously crumbled. If you think about it, how did the bread come about? It was flour. So you had wheat and barley, and you've crushed it, you've done tchin on it, and then you've reconstituted it to become bread. So it's a second type of tchina. So there's a rule, ein teichin acha teichin, as the Ramah carries on, ein teichin acha teichin. That's only talking about when you cut things and you leave it. If you're going to eat it immediately, hakol shari, then even cutting it very finely is okay. Just like beira, there's a concept of miyad. Also too with teichin, there's a concept of miyad, and therefore if you cut it finely to eat it straight away, you just want to eat your cucumber in a fine way, and you cut it very fine and eat it like that. That is shari. Okay, let's see the details in the Mishnah Berurah. Hamechatech yereg. Tolush. Of course, we're talking about a vegetable which is already detached from the ground. Mashma, since it doesn't differentiate, and therefore even vegetables which can be eaten raw, there is also a prohibition of tchina with foods. And you want to cut it very finely. Older people who can't cut it unless it's cut very fine. We don't go according to how the majority of the world eat it. Because here it's gidulei karka. Gidulei karka is therefore more strict because that's where the real issa of teichin kicks in. Te'ika techina b'gidulei karka, because tchina really is only for gidulei karka, like we've said. Okay, good. Seif cotton mem. So then we said that if you to crumble bread in front of chickens is okay. Crumbling is surely not allowed. The answer is ein teichin acha teichin. The bread has already been ground once before. So therefore, ein teichin acha teichin. Hainu, says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Cotton Mem, afilu lahochin lohem sheyochlu lachazman uchud lekame. So even if you take the bread and you crumble it and put it in front of the chickens for them to eat later on for the rest of the day, that's allowed because it's not caught by the issa of teichin. Why? The hoil, says the Ramah at the top line, hoil kvan nitchan, since it was previously ground, ein lochash, you've got no concern, the ein teichin acha teichin. Says the Mishnah Berurah Mem Aleph, ulefizeh lefarer tapuche adom of yirokas lifneim dak dak. Therefore, to cut vegetables, potatoes and vegetables in front for animals, dak dak, in a very fine way, like one would do for bigger animals. Also, that's not allowed. Unless they're about to eat. So he's saying the following. He's saying that when the Ramah says you're allowed to take bread and crumble bread and give it to your chickens and your pets, that's allowed because ein teichin acha teichin. That's one of the rules of teichin. If you take some cake or some bread and you crumble it, there's no violation of teichin there because ein teichin acha teichin. Well, so too you give your pets, no problem. But if you were to take a potato or vegetables and you cut it up very finely for your chickens and your things to eat, then that's a problem because if you're doing it not straight away. Because it's caught by teichin.
You can give challah on Shabbos into the garden to the birds.
No, so again, the trouble is we're only focusing here on teichin. The reason why it's okay over here is because it's for your animals. It's your animals. It's mazonos and alecha. Mashen came for you to put out some food for other animals, for birds. They're going to come.
Yeah.
But then, but there's a shaila of Shabbos stamazoi, whether that's okay. Generally speaking, to empty out the tablecloth in the garden is okay. The best thing to do is collect the challah afterwards and put it in a bag and then do it another time. They talk about Shabbos shira. There's a minute. So there, the posum question: how can you do that? Because who are you feeding it? You're feeding it for pigeons to come from outside. It's not your animals, so you haven't got the het of mezonos and alecha. So therefore, they say maybe it's before Shabbos. There's a lot of discussion about that. Because the birds came and ate the mon. They wanted Dasan Navirim, I think it was. They put out, the Medrash says, they put out the mon because Moshe Rabbeinu said there's no mon tomorrow. So they put out the mon and say, we'll show Moshe Rabbeinu up. So the birds came along and they took away the mon. So that morning there was no mon left and their plan was foiled. So to reward the birds, there's a minute to put out bread for the birds. But the shaila is, how can we do it? Because it's not Mazonos Lechos. That's what Yossi is saying. Yeah.
Cutting duck for some of the food is not a problem.
Correct. So we'll see in a second. It's all of this and more to come. Let's take a look. 5 lines down. So he's saying also, to feed the animals finely cut vegetables, if it's samach to their eating, that would be okay. Or like we're going to say in a minute. The best way to avoid this problem is when you're making a vegetable salad, or when you're feeding your animals and you're cutting up some food for them, just do the pieces a bit bigger than you would normally do, and then you've overcome all the problems. And certainly when it comes to feeding animals, certainly that you shouldn't do tircha, and this could be a tircha. Cutting it too fine is an unnecessary tircha. Okay, now v'chol zeh lo mayri. What's this going on? The second line of the Ramah. V'chol zeh lo mayri b'choytech u'meniach. But if it's la'achla miyad, then you're allowed to do it, right? So the shali, that's your expressed your surprise. Let's take a look. Members, v'chol zeh lo mayri koi gam al chituch yarg dag hamusk b'reish sif. So it's going on. All of the above. Cutting it very finely, samach l'suda, for eating straight away, that's not a problem. La'achla miyad, v'uadin, te'echad yochel lachtech l'tzorech acherim v'hem yochlu miyad, not only for you, but if I want to prepare a salad for other people to eat, I'm allowed to do it. If you take a look at 56, in the second paragraph he says, so just like with boire, I don't have to finish all the good potatoes that I've taken from the pot or the good piece of chicken that I want. I chose it beheta. I did a maisa boire beheta. I will also liver adash but I can't just choose for the next meal. That's all. Okay. Mem dalet. So then we said, aval im loch lemiyat hakol shari. Then it's all going to be mutter. Hatam says the Mishnah Berurah Mem dalet, important Mishnah Berurah. The lo shaykh shem tchina keshemechatich besakin el betoichin lo niach. When have I violated this of teichin? When I've ground something down. I've ground something down, number one, and number two, when I'm cutting with a knife, it's only a problem if I'm going to do it lahaniach, to leave it for a later time. But if I'm eating my potato now, or I'm eating my vegetables, and I'm cutting it very small because that's just the way I like to cut it, that's just derech achila. That's not teichin, that's just how I eat. That's okay. So, avol kedei lechol miyad vaday shari, says the Mishnah Berurah. Shari lo osur ala odom lechol machol b'chatichas gedolos ektanas. There's no insistence that I've got to have big pieces of potato or vegetables or whatever. I can eat how I want to eat. That's just derech achila. Im kein havi derech achilos bekach, and therefore it's okay. V'uadin im meichin hayerek dak lifnei atar negolin sheyechol miyad kam kein shari hoel mezonos lecha. Since, like we said before, Yossi, it's mezonos lecha. Therefore, to cut it very finely for them to eat straight away would be okay. Now let's take a look. A very interesting note which explores this a little bit more. 57 first. Which is really what you're asking. This whole heta of cutting things very fine, somach l'suda, kosva chazan ish, she'alachila t'midis leichal shem omel melacha. On your regular eating, it's not. You can't say there's a melacha over here. V'lochein af k'shemechin somach l'suda, einu teichein ve'einu beira. If I'm taking a piece of the good potato from the bad potatoes, or I'm taking the nuts from the raisins, or the piece of chicken that I want to go away from the dark from the white, and all that sort of thing. That's just derech achila. That's not a ma'isa boira. That's just how I eat. And so too with teichen. If I cut it up in a fine way, says the Chazon Ish, that's not teichen. If it's samach l'suda, that's the svara of samach l'suda. This is just derech achila. And it's following ma'isa l'achila. So this is just, it's toffel, it's subordinate, it's periphery to how I normally eat. Okay, that's the svara of why samach l'suda is allowed for boira and for teichen. Yeah.
With a salad.
Yeah.
How many minutes is samach l'suda?
So in Hilchos Boira questions, it would be whatever is needed for that suda. So, for example, if you've got 20 guests coming for Shabbos lunch, that could be several hours. If it's just you and your wife, then it could be 20 minutes. So it's very variable. It depends on what is needed for that suda. That's the way Rav Moshe is magdir it. Okay, now 58, also an interesting ha'ara. He says that concept of teichen, cutting up into small pieces, is that is samach l'suda is allowed. We've just said. But what about mashing? What about risuk? We spoke about it yesterday and the day before. So if you look at 58, v'davka lachtech es ayerek lechatichas, aval l'raskoi, but to mash it, kosav ha'chazon ish, she'osa, afilu samach l'suda. Mashing samach l'suda, even that is not allowed. V'vatam achiluk, and what's the difference? Kosav sham, sh'lehite ha'rashba l'chituch tak tak, she'kivim de'ika ha'chituch u'derech achila, like we just said. And ein chiluk ben chatichas ketanas ben chatichas gedolas. This is how I eat. V'akol nechshav derech achila. Avul risuk, for you to sit there in your Shabbos lunch and mash a banana at your table, dahainu kasisha, crushing it down. Harihu kamaisa tchina mamish. That is a maisa of tchina. That's not derech achila. Ve'enzu derech achila ela tikun hamaychel b'tzuras acheres. You're preparing the food in a different way. It's not achila. It's something else. Ve'en achilasa miyad pula b'zeh klum, and just doing it samach, it doesn't help you. Ve'en heter l'rasek ela b'yodish hasakin, and therefore the only way to mash, like we said the other day, is using the handle with a shin with the handle of a knife or something like that. Oid bier, further, just next paragraph. He's quoted Shemiuch nechshav kasia b'kli hamiyuchad u'meishech alav shem melacha u'manatik me'alav shem eichel she'en ze. Okay, we'll leave that. Fine, beseder. Okay, weiter. Where are we? Memhei. Yeah. So we said that if you cut it in small pieces for samach l'suda, that's okay. Shari. Now, the reason why it's not straightforward is there are those who debate this. Memhei. Some people question, ultimately it's a Rashba who says that dak is okay, like we've discussed till now. That even somebody who's eating samach l'suda should try and avoid cutting things too finely and should do it a little bit bigger than you would do it normally during the week. And with times there, that you should do it a little bit bigger than normal. But those who don't, and those who cut onions, for example, and radishes very finely, you shouldn't protest. Your point, Paul. Don't do it too early because it's got to be samach l'suda. So at least if you're preparing a salad, wait till you come in from shul and don't do it at 8 o'clock in the morning before you go to shul because that's not samach l'suda. Do it after you come back from shul, and that will be samach l'suda. The bo'in and samach l'suda mamish. Kamesh shekasa b'simin shin test in boira. Okay, as just discussed. And for those who do it too early, they're cutting a radish or an onion very finely and way before the suda begins. It could be there's an issa deraisa, and the basarim will be also to eat it. Even this also mishum beira. I'm besayf siman shivago. I came out of last night Mariv, and I see another guy coming out of a Mariv, and he goes to a different Dirshul Sheh, and he's we're a week or two ahead, and he says, beira. He says it's so easy to be over Issa Deraisa. I said, yeah, welcome to the world of beira. Yeah, that is it. That beira is one of the perhaps the few halachas that A are very relevant on a weekly basis nowadays, and B, it's very easy to get it wrong. It's very easy to get it right. You got to just know. So if you you do one thing, you take the you like the peanuts and you don't like the raisins, you take the raisins and you put them away. The charis is deraisa. And the last skinny line. If you take a special implement, a grater or something like that, to cut it very finely, then for sure it's a problem. So too with beira, when you use a designated specialized equipment, it's going to be osa. Right, he's teaching us how to make herring. That when you cut onions very fine and you put it with the fish, yeah, which he says at the bottom is a kupit, some sort of chopper or something. You shouldn't use a specialized equipment. You could say that this chopper is a designated knife used for chopping things. But rak basakin ba'alma, if you're going to cut things, then make sure if samach l'suda, there is, of course, we can rely on the rashba to cut it very finely, but that's only samach l'suda. Even though the minig is to do it, to cut it a bit thicker than normal. That's the best safeguard. For gam belav hachi also mishum of the duchol, and if you use a chopper or something like that, then it's a separate. Aside from the issues of beira or teichen, there's an issue of the duchol for chanal b'sif yud. Okay, if you just stop there for a second, if you look at number 60, the big question is we haven't really discussed is again what have we said? To cut something samach l'suda very fine, the Rashba and others say it's okay. The Mishnah said it's toiv if you can to just cut slightly bigger than normal, and that way you've avoided all problems. There's no shaila of teichin. The shaila is what is bigger than normal, right? How do you define that? So if you look at footnote 60, he says this: the shiur chatichas gedolos k'tzas kozva chazan ish. So that's why I kept saying all the way, a bit bigger than you would normally do your salad. So if you make your salad during the week and you cut the cucumbers and the tomatoes very, very fine, then on Shabbos just cut the pieces a little bit bigger. Okay. V'das hagonim shlomo zalman Orach, a very interesting definition. Shekol shetzorich litchin es hamaychel b'shinayim ein ze nechshav dak. What is dak? If you can eat it without having to chew the food and break it down further. So that's pretty small. If you want to cut your radish for chodom and other vegetables, you got to still break it down, then that's not dak. So if you think about it, if you're cutting a salad, I mean imagine any salad you have with the pieces, even if they're very small, you're still going to have to break it down further with your teeth. So according to that Rav Shlomo Zalman's definition, it's got to be very, very thin, very fine. It's so fine that you can just eat it without chewing it. Okay, let's finish off this sif. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom of the page in my version. Hamafarer chatichas eitz. So teichin doesn't only apply to foods; it could apply to other things as well. Hamafarer chatichas eitz. If you crumble or break down pieces of wood, shenirkav, which have become rotten, v'oisemenu pulua, and you make a pulua. I'm not sure what avaka is, like dust, like sawdust. V'chein hamafaret sror ofo, you break dirt. Chayiv mishum teichen. There's also an issue of teichen. V'chein, and so too, hanoiser eitzim. If you saw wood, lehonis b'neser shlen, to get the sawdust. Oy hashof loshen shamateches. So if you file metal, shekerin pilin beloshen Ashkenaz, chayiv mishayoshev kolshu, even a small amount is chayiv mishum teichen. From mechatich eitzim dag v'oiser sektanim. If you take pieces of wood and you make them into smaller pieces of wood, im dikdek mehen kadei levashel kagros v'beitz chayiv. If you make it into a certified, certain type of size, enough to cook a beitza, then you're going to be chayiv. V'im hu chaytich lechatichas gedolos v'makbid al hamida. And if you do it on slightly bigger things, you may then, and you're makbid on the exact size, then lechotcha b'kavona b'zeh hamokum kederech shenagin chaytich eitzim chayiv mishum meleches mechatich. Mechatich is defined as you're cutting to measure, and therefore that would be a problem with that. You cut pieces of wood into the size of a toothpick or something like that, then you're going to have a problem. Well, just there's time just to do Yud Gimel. It's a very short one, and that will set us up for Monday. But just to summarize what we've said, that a few rules that emerge from Sif Yud base, and that is Mechatich Teichin is one of the melachos on Shabbos. Cutting things too finely is caught by Teichin. And it applies not only to Gidulei Karka, but it applies also to wood and to metals and things like that. However, Somach L'Suda, there is the Rashba and others are Matir, and therefore if you cut things Somach L'Suda, there is what to rely on. However, the minig is to cut things a little bit bigger than normal. How much is bigger than normal? As discussed. Okay. Okay, let's just quickly do Yud Gimel. Also, lirdos chalas dvash mi'akaveres. You're not allowed to extract honey from the hive on Shabbos. Pirush hakan shadverim osim b'advash, the hive that bees make honey from. Because it's like being toilish. You're sort of detaching something from its habitat. V'davka im devukin b'kaveres. Davka if the honey is attached to the honeycomb. Sorry, to the hive. Avol im nislishum b'oidyoim. If the honey was already detached from before Shabbos, oishin israsku b'oidyoim. V'advash sof b'kaveres. It's just sort of floating. Then it's separate and it's not attached to the hive anymore. Then mutza lirdois b'Shabbos. Then you're allowed to detach it on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Memvav, Dvash me'akaveres, Hainu, afilu lo yirtz livra hadvash min hashayva. Even if you don't want to take away the honey from the wax, tezeo b'chal mefarik, because then you've got a separate issue of like a boire mefarik issue. Eliyikach chalas atzma min hakaveres. You want to take the whole honeycombs from the hive, that is not allowed. Shedoim elatoilesh. Because the place where the dvash is growing, as it were, is in the hive. And therefore it's considered like mechuba. And therefore, if you're detaching the honey from it, that's not allowed on Shabbos. However, if the honey is already detached, the honeycombs are detached from the hive, and therefore you can't say it's mechuba. And therefore, if you want to have that honey on Shabbos, which is already detached from before Shabbos, that's okay. But you can't crush it to take the honey from the wax. Like we said, it's like taking the grain from the husk. And therefore you've got to wait till the evening if it comes out by itself. But if it was flowing and fully detached before Shabbos, then it would be okay. It's just that the honey has moved away from the hive. Therefore, to take that type of honey, that would be okay. The su ein shaykh lakaveres, because it's no longer sort of connected to the hive. But to take the honeycombs away from the hive, that is not allowed, because they are still attached to the hive. Okay, good. Say that.